APIs You Won't Hate. It's me, Mike, with Phil here. Phil, how's it going?
Hey, pretty good. I've been out in the field planting trees in the rain all day, so just, normal.
Pretty standard stuff. Yeah, where in the world are you catching up with me from today?
Southwest of England again, which is my usual corner of the world these days.
Yeah, it's an odd feeling that you have a usual place to me. I don't think I'll ever quite get used to that because it sort of feels like you're hopping about and jumping from forest to forest, like an idea I can't quite get a grasp on.
It has been all over the place. I mean, it's been a bit weird. I'm in the Peak District, which is up near Manchester one day, and then like North Wales around the corner the next, looking at a bit of land, and then rushing off to do a planting project in London. And then I've been putting some real miles on my like electric rental thing, but hopefully I can ditch the car soon and get back to being the wandering woodsman on two wheels, because I'm recovered from my injury. The surgery recovery's gone nicely. I'm back and I can like lift stuff without crying, and I'm back to health. So there'll be plenty of moving around, but it'll be bike powered instead.
Yeah, well, that's great to hear. I'm glad to hear your recovery's gone well. Did you end up having two surgeries?
No, just the one in the end. There were some like other side effects. Basically, I had like a surgery and then I was still in loads of pain. And I was like, what the hell's going on? And basically, it's just because I had gone from being incredibly active to sitting on the couch for 4 months. There were like loads of other problems going on, like crazy stomach acid, just like causing pain everywhere. So it seemed like there was something much bigger going on. But it's like, oh no, you've just been really lazy for a while and your body's upset about it. It's all sorted out now.
Yeah, cool. Well, I'm glad to hear it. I'm glad you're back in one piece. And I guess just probably as the weather starts to get a little nicer there, you can get back on two wheels and kind of start to do all the things that you'd like to do.
Yeah, we're currently being battered by Storm Ursula, which is a ridiculous name for quite a vicious storm. But the weather should start getting nicer in a couple of days.
Yeah, well, I'm glad to hear it. I want to get an update from you on your work with Protect Earth. I want to hear a little bit about what's been going on with APIs You Won't Hate and some of the work we've put out there. But first, before we do that, let's hear a little bit from our sponsors. This episode of APIs You Won't Hate is brought to you by Treble. Treble is an API management platform that helps developers and companies understand their APIs better, and in the process saves a lot of time and money. What started out as a solution for their own problems has grown into a platform that's processing more than 9 million API requests a month. Treble features real-time API monitoring, automatically generated documentation, logging and error tracking, API analytics, and one-click API testing. To learn more about Treble, go to treble.com/APIsYouLove. That's Treble, TREBLLE.com/APIsYouLove. Thank you so much to Treble for sponsoring APIs You Won't Hate. This episode of APIs You Won't Hate is brought to you by Lob. Lob is a group of passionate people working towards their vision of increasing connectivity between the offline and online worlds. They help developers send postcards, letters, and checks as easily as email through RESTful APIs. Lob is looking for engineers at all levels interested in joining a successful growth stage startup. They offer collaborative culture, supporting teamwork and mentorship. Their founders have a strong vision of building a product-led organization, and it's an opportunity to have a big impact on Lob's business and engineering culture. Lob is built using open API specifications for contract testing, generating documentation, and soon SDKs. Their API is written in a mix of JavaScript, Golang, and Elixir, and their customer-facing dashboards are built with Vue.js. If you're interested in joining Lob, check them out online at lob.com/careers. Thank you so much to Lob for sponsoring APIs You Won't Hate. And we're back. So, Phil, tell me, you've been outside, you've been doing things. What's the latest with the charity?
Yeah, I've barely been looking at my laptop, which is ridiculous because there's a lot more planning work to be done. But it is the height of planting season. I'm pretty much planting trees every day. Sometimes it's a volunteer project where there's 60 of us trying to get through 5,000 trees in 3 days. And sometimes there's 8 of us and I've got some like tough paid planters. We had a few projects where there was maybe 8 of us doing 1,500 trees a day. So the number of trees we can get done in a day really varies project to project. But yeah, there's loads of projects going on. It's pretty much every day, like back to back. Thursday, I'll be in the Cotswolds. Friday, I'll be in London. All weekend, I'll be up in Manchester. It's like as soon as it gets dark planting, I jump in the car and just scream off to the next project. But yeah, the charity's in a funny place because we've basically paid for loads and loads and loads of trees and been planting loads and loads of trees. And now I've got to do the job of documenting all the trees so that they start showing up on people's ecology profiles and everywhere else where we get our money from. And we've had a few new funding partners on board. So I've had to do some work on our API and the iPhone app because we use an iPhone app to take photographs of all the trees. That gets them up in our API, and then funding partners can pull those photographs of trees in for whatever reason. And yeah, that's a Laravel PHP app that Matt originally put together. And it's using a whole bunch of open API as well. So it feels pretty cool to have like quit working in tech and quit working on APIs, but still be doing loads of API work and open API work and then writing about it for APIs you won't hate. So I haven't gone too far.
Yeah, it's rare to get to actually be able to meaningfully use the stuff you want to build and be your own user is kind of an interesting place to be in. So give me a sense of scale here. I know it's been a long winter for you. Do you have some estimate for how many trees you've planted with your volunteers in the past few months?
We planted 3,000 trees roughly, I think, in the last winter. And then this winter we've done about 15,000 under projects that we kind of directly control. But I know that there's another double that. There's another like 17,000 floating around that we've kind of paid for, but I haven't got out to the projects to see them yet. So we're looking at about 35,000 trees this season, and there are still more to come. We've probably got another 10,000 left to do before the middle of March. It's all a bit bonkers. So we've really, grown that up, and we're starting to get our hands on huge chunks of land as well. So we've just had, it's only 7 more sleeps until we get our hands on the Cornish bit of land, the ancient replanted woodland.
Heck yeah.
And that has been an emotional roller coaster since October, because there's been so many times where it seemed like we might not get it. There was a few issues around like VAT and like negotiations with the philanthropic donor. And there's been a lot of different things going on, but like, I think, contracts are being exchanged in 7 days.
Oh, that's amazing.
And we've started working with people who are basically, the original plan was that we kind of raise a bunch of money from donors and then buy land directly. And we're still doing that. But we've also got this really interesting person who has just got millions of pounds apparently burning a hole in his pocket. And he wants to kind of buy land and hold on to it. And then he needs someone to reforest it. So it's kind of more like a partnership where we'll lease the land for, I don't know, £1 a year or something. And we'll manage the land back to being a forest. And so we've just found 27 acres for him, and the offer was accepted. And that's only using like 1% of the money.
Wow.
So there's going to be a lot of land for us to plant, which is why it's all about scaling things up, making things more efficient, making the project planning more efficient. I was talking about that last time, and making sure that the API is solid and does everything that our funding partners need so they can pull out all the data and run their business off of it and not have any bugs and mistakes. Because that whenever I have to try and like figure out what's going wrong with the API or awkward mismatches, it's like I'm in a field and I'm trying to send you samples of code and curl requests on my phone. This is not going well.
Surreal.
So I have to make sure that thing is like slick and reliable and not taking me away from the actual work at hand.
Yeah, surreal. That's incredible. It sounds like you have been figuring out how to scale beyond just the fill, which is one of the core problems I'm sure that you have there. It's sort of unbelievable for me to imagine that there's, I don't know, sounds like 15, 20, 30,000 trees being planted this year, and each one of them will also have a glamour shot. Pretty wild, man. That's very cool.
Yeah, luckily we have a lot of different types of projects where some of them we handle the entire thing, and sometimes the project has already been planned by a big group, like say the Woodland Trust, and they're just looking for someone to do the actual planting. And so with those sort of projects, luckily we can just shove them in and take like a few establishing shots, but we don't have to take a photograph of every one. But yeah, there are some of those projects where like we're planting 4,000 trees near Bath soon, my neck of the woods. And I'm going to have to go out and photograph 4,000 trees and put, that one's a bird cherry, that one's a rowan, that one's a
You're about to
get like £3 for every one.
Yeah, that's really cool. You are also about to have the least interesting Instagram feed I've ever seen, but I'm into it. That's great.
Yeah, I should hook it up so every single one just goes straight out. People are like, we don't care about this at all. They all look the same. They're all 2 years old. It's not interesting.
That's right. Yeah, really cool, man. So the work that you've been doing to support that, kind of the infrastructure behind this stuff, has resulted in some learnings and some articles that we've published recently on the site for APIs You Won't Hate. You want to tell us a little bit about that?
So Matt did a great job of putting the API together in a bit of a rush. We were kind of given an API hosted by like another planting partner of one of our funding partners. There's a company called Future Forest Company. They do amazing things. They do things slightly differently, but they're a good group of people. And we basically had to kind of copy their API so that they could be integrated into one of our funding partners really easily. So we didn't really bother designing the API as such. We just kind of went, make it look like that. And that seemed like a reasonable reason to not design it. It's one of those things like the mechanic's car is always broken, or like the shoemaker's son never has shoes, or whatever. There's a million of those phrases around. Like, I know chefs that just microwave all of their dinners when they get home from work. It's always that thing of like, you think you're an expert in it, so you just kind of don't bother. And I thought, I know all about API design first. I know enough to know when I should use it and when I shouldn't. And I totally messed up there. Not having OpenAPI from the start just meant that we didn't have any API documentation when we had a second funding partner. They wanted to get on board, and I'm like, oh, let me send you some awkward curl examples, and if you have questions, just figure it out, I guess. And that led to a bunch of integration issues. And we had no way to do contract testing. There were just no tests at all. So we made a bunch of changes to improve performance, because it was built to handle like hundreds of trees, and then we've got tens of thousands of trees. So yeah, things kind of blew up in our face in a bunch of different ways, from just having no docs, having no contract testing, and not being able to do design first for new functionality. So if we want to add a new endpoint, we've kind of got to have this like weird separate, we started a new open API from scratch, and it just had the one endpoint in it with nothing else. So it was kind of useless. You couldn't use it for mocking or anything else. So I really wish I stuck to my own advice. I've been talking about how important API design first is for months, and then I just don't do it. And it's immediately justified everything I've been saying for years.
Yeah, I think we can chalk it up to a good reminder that it's helpful to put yourself in the right shoes from time to time to reinvigorate that context, I tend to live more on the visual design side of things in sort of past lives. And that's something that a lot of designers will say, like, you really need to go and do sketches and put together wireframes and all these other things before you start building. And every single designer I know with a website went and splashed some CSS onto their code editor and started making a mess that way first. So I'm also definitely guilty of that. It's tempting to go in and do it the wrong way first. And the quote that I always bandy about from a friend and a mentor is from, I think it's a Frank Lloyd Wright quote that's essentially like, as an architect, your most valuable tools are the pencil at the drawing board and a sledgehammer on the construction site. And it's sort of like, guess which one of those is cheaper? It's definitely usually a better idea to spend some time with a piece of paper or, your design system writing things down ahead of time, or you can go and build it. And then when your project goes from 100 trees to 1,000 trees to 10,000, you're going to be sledgehammering your app into shape and starting from scratch and wasting a bunch of time.
Yeah. I mean, there were so many things that, like, not at all Matt's fault. It really, really hard to spot, but like there were little things where the API we were copying was a numeric string, and instead of an integer or whatever, and PHP had opinions and just did it one way or the other. And they're really small, hard to spot things, but that can cause a bunch of errors on the other side. So yeah, I think I'm just never making that mistake again. I'm always gonna, if I ever need someone to make an API for me, I'm always gonna say, right, here's the Open API spec. When you build it, implement contract testing with the spec and like make sure it passes. Because if it doesn't pass this Open API, like it doesn't work the way I want it to. So you're not getting paid until you fix it.
Sure, yeah.
Like make that pass, and then the contract is done. The job is done.
I will say I've definitely been on the other side of fill requests for software in the past. And usually it starts with a cheeky like, hey, I've got a quick idea for something that's going to be really easy to go and build out. And really, like, you're just polishing the tip of the iceberg and introducing it to me in a way that sounds, like it'll be a quick coffee break project. And they get big pretty fast. So we've all been victim to this. Yeah. I think, Matt and I are no strangers to these sizes of problems. And sometimes you just do what you can with the time you've got, for sure.
Yeah. I need to like change how I do business. You're completely right. Like how I do everything is messed up, because it's always like the quickest, laziest, crappiest version of everything. Like I'm usually zipping about doing a million things, and then like an idea pops into my head, and maybe it's like 3 pints in, but I'm just like, oh yeah, we totally need to do this thing. Hey, Mike, can you do this thing? And I just fire over a DM, and you're like, I guess, and then you do what seems sensible, and it wasn't exactly what I imagined based on 10 words, and then I'm like, how? You messed it up. Need to spend, but again, that's like the benefit of the kind of the open API thing, or just generally writing down a bloody project brief. Both if it's an API, like the more time you can spend planning the thing, the less time you spend undoing the thing. Because if I just say 10 words at you and you take a swing at it, it's not going to be exactly what I meant, is it?
For sure. Yeah. A thoughtful proposal is the hard part of the job on some level when you're doing planning and sort of the leadership side of things. And by the way, I should say that wasn't meant to be a personal critique or attack or anything like that. We've all done it. I do it myself.
Yeah, I'm well aware. It was kind of why I had to quit the last job, right? It was like I'm doing a full-time job and a charity and trying to like for a while like get Dutch residency and start this software consulting business and then like people were like, hey, come and do this PHP meetup, and then there's a podcast, and then everyone fuck off of it. But yeah, thankfully, hopefully as I get more time I can put more effort into doing things properly, I think, or I'll just keep taking on more tree planting projects and keep rushing around doing them all badly. We'll see.
Yeah. Well, hey, part of the reason we have the site and the podcast is to scale your wisdom and the experiences that we all have. And the thing I haven't really said in public is that part of the reason we're also recording your voice over and over is that just so that we can take all the words you've written and throw them through machine learning and deep fake Phil wisdom from here forward. So you can go play in the trees and we'll just set up a Phil bot to yell at people on the internet when we need it.
Sounds good. Well, speaking of getting machines to do our bidding, one of the 2 articles we put up recently was about using Akita, a really helpful tool. It's the tool I use to get me out of the hole where like, okay, we have API, we need open API so that we can do a bunch of useful things, docs, mocks, contract testing. But I am not going to sit down there and go to every endpoint and go, oh, there's a property called, foo, and it looks like a string, and enter, format equals date, and just click 1,000 buttons or type 1,000 lines of YAML. That just sounds like death. And no one got time for that. So we did an article called Creating Open API from HTTP Traffic, and it will like show you how it all works. But it's super handy. I knew there were tools out there that did it, and I'd kind of like played with them a little bit a year ago, and they were all still a little bit, kind of getting there, but they're really good now. And there's another one called Optic, which people recommend. I played around with some betas that were a little tricky, but I've heard that's made a lot of progress too. So Akita or Optic can help you out. But it's amazing to just say, hey, look, my API is over there. Poke a few endpoints with your HTTP client of choice, curl, Postman, whatever, Insomnia. And then it just goes, right, you've got these endpoints, these properties, these MIME types. There's your open API.
Yeah.
And you're done.
Yeah, that's pretty amazing. It's definitely hacker friendly. And I mean, hacker in maybe the nicer sense of the word, not like I'm going to go steal your bank account necessarily, but like if you want to figure out how something is built or get some introspection into the way that someone else has designed an API that you use, like it can be a useful exercise to go in and dive in and use that kind of thing. Even if you're not going and re-engineering an API or putting design docs and testing together around something that you're already using, like kind of interesting to see the way that things are organized from, soup to nuts. It's one of those things that's really easy to do with some of the other things we work with. But like, yeah, these tools are really coming into shape lately and definitely hitting a stage where it's like, oh, you can go and do some really meaningful, interesting hackery with this stuff and put together a useful prototype based on an API that exists.
Yeah, for sure. And I can think about how it would have helped me in a lot of different projects in the past. Like when I was at giant co-working company that I need to stop naming when I'm complaining about them, I was constantly trying to get people to write open API. We had a few people that were like, yeah, I'm going to make open API. I want docs and mocks and SDK generations and all that good stuff. And I bribed people with pizza. That helped. But it was still quite a lot of reach out effort. And then it was like trying to get people to slide that work into their sprints when they have completely unmanageable deadlines already, and constant rewrites because they never wrote any docs in the first place. So they don't know how it works. So they're too busy doing the rewrite to write the docs, which means they'll probably have to do another rewrite in the future. So I was trying to get people out of that cycle. And I could just imagine like dropping Akita or something similar, Optic, some sort of traffic sniffing proxy, I could just imagine dropping that into the end-to-end test suite where we've got multiple APIs all talking to each other. And then all of that traffic is being recorded, and you can then convert that into Open API. And awesomely, for the APIs and teams that did have Open API, we were dropping that into the end-to-end test suite with a validation proxy. So if you suddenly made a change that broke your Open API, it would say error, error. So you could kind of use the end-to-end test suite to create the Open API if you don't have it. And then once you do have it, you can use it for validation testing. And you wouldn't have to say, please, 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 can you sit down and type out every single property and every single thing? Because again, humans will get that wrong. So yeah, it's a really useful tool, and I'm glad that I got to play with it, because I think a lot more people can use that to catch up, because so many people I know, like I've done the poll a few times. It's like, are you code first, design first, switching from code first to design first, or like awkward combination? And most people are awkward combination or switching. So yeah, using those tools, you can kind of play catch up, get your Open API, and move on from there. Design first, all the things,
Yeah, I think the reality is there's very few companies that any of us get to work with on any level that are like starting from scratch and getting to play with things from the ideal scenario. And especially if you've got something that's, 10, 15 years old, like you're working your way back towards compliance is a mega chore. And some of those tasks that are sitting down and staring at YAML or, HTTP responses sound torturous for experienced people and are probably a little too important to give to someone who's like in an internship or data entry role or whatever, for a variety of reasons. And putting tooling in the middle, I guess, is sort of the obvious engineer's response there, is to figure out some way to automate it in a way that's reliable.
I've definitely seen some engineers kind of saying, well, we don't need to ever make an Open API because we can always just produce them automatically. And that's taking the point too far a little bit. Like I think some Optic definitely seems to kind of be portraying that as like, you don't need to spend time designing it because you could just, make it automatically. And I don't know if that's still their messaging or maybe it never was. But I worry about that sort of concept, because what I did with Akita was use it to get a starting point that's pretty accurate and then tweak it from there. And there were things missing, and there was like the human touch was missing. It was just what you can sniff and contrive. And I think there were a few examples in there, but I wanted to put some more targeted examples. And I had to remove a few sensitive UUIDs because, with certain UUIDs, the way it's currently built, if you have the UUID of a funding partner, you can just see all of their orders and save all of their trees and not have to pay for them. So I don't want to put their ID in the docs. And so I think anything that you get from one of these tools that kind of looks at what's going on and takes the best educated guess it can, it's never going to be perfect. It's never going to be a publishable document that you would be proud to make, your API reference documentation of choice for end users. It's just like a useful artifact that's getting pretty close. It's like a quick leg up more than anything else,
Yeah.
And I've seen some engineers go, well, great, I don't have to do the time consuming thing because I'll just do the automated bad thing. And that just seems lazy.
Yeah, easy to maybe interpret in bad faith, I suppose, or like in a way that makes life easier, but not necessarily in the long run beneficial, certainly. I wanted to mention one of the things I've been thinking about lately. So I think I'd imagine you're probably much more disconnected from the internet and Twitter and things than I am these days as a result of you mostly literally getting your hands dirty. But you and I tend to run in slightly different like developer circles online. And one of the things I've been noticing a lot lately is a lot of sort of like, call it indie web sort of developers and people building their own products and whatnot, who are building on top of frameworks like, Jekyll and Vue and Remix is one of the newer ones, and Next.js and all these other things that have really interesting integrations for sort of natively supporting automatically generated serverless functions within a sort of web application context. So you could basically use a command line app to generate the framework for a web app. And then by creating a file in a specific place, it gets deployed to an Amazon serverless app or, whatever other hosting provider.
Voodoo magic. I love it.
Pretty cool. Yeah. And it's all done, like it hooks into CI really nicely and does lots of good things with that. In addition to giving sort of the in most cases, JavaScript oriented hooks into the API lifecycle or the HTTP verbs and things like that you would want for an API. there is a lot of cool stuff you can do with that, and you can kind of imagine that being the middle layer for a lot of things. In fact, actually, the our new APIs You Won't Hate site uses some of this stuff for like our contact form, where we sort of use that as the middle layer to fire things off to places to automate our lives on the other end when we get a contact. But what's interesting to me there is that there's almost no discussion around how to keep track of those things and how to make sure that you are, not using your a delete verb for a post and those kinds of things. And in those communities in particular, there is precious little education to begin with on, why you would make these kinds of choices, and why it's important to consider like the shape of things coming into your API, or where they're coming from, and validating and doing things like reCAPTCHAs and honeypots and all those sorts of things. I bring all this up mostly to say that, like, I think that's an interesting avenue for maybe me to head down over the coming months in terms of considering types of things that we can help those sorts of developers with, because I think it's largely unknown to lots of folks in this audience. One, the structure of these sorts of APIs, even if it's a very basic CRUD thing for one use case, like a lot of it seems to be just like smash this code into place and it'll work. Trust me, like I know because of the pixels.
Shove it in.
And the other side of it is too, like the debug tooling to be able to go and build these things, like using Postman, Insomnia, all those things to go and actually fire off the HTTP requests to test just the serverless function. I never see those talked about when people are building these serverless things on these frameworks. So I think there's very likely a hole in documentation, a hole in content produced there, a hole in just discussion around like, here's what's actually going on behind the scenes here. Here's how you can think about it, and here's how you can build and debug it as a developer building these things out. Whether you're creating a contact form or completing a purchase, or I don't know, you name it, creating an account for your visitors to your app or whatever the case may be. It's an interesting thing where we have full stacked our way into what could be a potentially like security averse kind of mindset. I'm not, I won't say I'm preoccupied about it, but I'm definitely fascinated by the way all that stuff is developing.
Yeah, that sounds really interesting. I keep seeing fantastic things coming along, and generally I'm only introduced to new front end kind of frameworks when you switch the website to them. And you're like, this cool new tool came out, it does this, this, and this. And I'm like, all right. And you like moved us from wherever it was,
Gatsby before or something. Next now,
there was Middleman for a while, and then Gatsby, and then we were on I don't even know, but we switched to Netlify, and then I was like, oh damn, this is really good. And then Vercel, you're like, that's even better, makes Netlify look like rubbish. Like all these kind of new changes come along and make things faster and easier and better. And so I have been really impressed with a lot of that front end world. But like the specific troubles you're describing, it just kind of makes me laugh. I feel like we went from a period where, server side pages were very static. It's like, I'm going to figure out what HTML to spit out, and then you'll do a form and I'll think about it and spit out some HTML. And that was very static. And that's like kind of Web 1, right? Or maybe when you got to forms, it was like kind of getting into Web 2. And we're not going to talk about 3 today. That can get in the bin. There was this kind of period in kind of Web 2 where it was like more rich and interactive, and we started to do a lot more AJAX functions. So you had a site that felt generally quite static, being loaded by the server every time. And then you had these little random AJAX functions, these little random endpoints that would be just called whatever. And maybe you had like an AJAX controller and grouped them under that. Like /AJAX/ whatever random logic you wanted. And they were all just like floaty, totally disparate. No one was really meant to use them, although they totally could. And it was just kind of a floating function useful for the front end. And then we went through this period of like glorifying the API for many good reasons, but all of a sudden it became about like, I'm making an API for my website, and this API will be called like API.whatever, and it should all be consistent and lovely and follow all these rules. I don't know what rules, what can we do to make it good? Restish, sure, those are the rules that we will follow. And everyone kind of focused on that, and the idea of these floaty, disparate Ajaxy functions just kind of fell away. But it sounds like we're moving back towards that very quickly without taking any of the lessons learned from either of those 2 iterations, because there are reasons why you do things like use the correct HTTP method, right? gave a talk ages ago, like the original API pain points talk I used to do back in the day. It sounds like a lot of that stuff might be good content for them, because there's things like, some company, I think it was Rackspace, they had an API that you would delete action was on a get method. And so Google found the XML,
the crawler,
the XML collection, and started crawling all those endpoints and just deleting people's servers, just bang, 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 just deleting them.
Oh, that's
and it, like Google's just sitting there going, right. It's like Google's sitting there going, I wonder what's on this link. Oh, nothing. That's weird. I wonder what's on this link. Oh, nothing. That's weird. Right. So these things matter. The conventions matter. You don't know why they matter, so you think they don't matter, but they bloody well do. And so if we're kind of getting a bunch of people who are generally not that used to all of the horror stories that I've been trying to tell for years and other people have been going on about, and they just think, oh, it's just some ivory tower nonsense and preferences and opinions and whatever, they're going to build a bunch of shit and repeat all the same mistakes.
Yeah, everything old is indeed new again in this case. And it's funny because a lot of these things are pitched as like, this is just a really fast way. Like, it's fast and you'll get it done, and it's deployed on the edge of the network, so it's performant. And it's like, yeah, cool. Like that's great and all, but if I'm giving you the nuclear football faster and on the edge of the network, it's not a good thing for me. I need some degree of certainty that the things are being built here are done responsibly, or in ways that won't open up holes in the functionality of the software. And I think there's very likely to be quite a few exploits to do with these things, as people like go and copy paste unwittingly some code from a very popular tutorial that doesn't happen to consider these things, or like is just reusable in all kinds of places. All things we've seen before, and definitely like not meaning to point to anything in particular and say this is bad, but it's more the rough concept right. of the thing that's starting to worry me.
Man, it does just seem like a walk down memory lane a lot. Like copying and pasting random insecure PHP code you found on a tutorial was how I started.
Yeah.
Like
that's the only way I've ever done
20 plus years ago. That's the first thing I was doing. Yeah. And it's not great.
Yeah. Right. And
like you copy and paste a class off of a blog, and you'd have to change all of the all of the quotation marks had accidentally been converted to backticks or smart quotes or curly quotes.
Sure.
Sage there, find and replacing. And now you type like composer install and you get that package installed with a checksum to make sure it's not been completely screwed. But yeah, like let's not do all that again. Let's not go backwards.
Yeah. Maybe I'll have to sit down and actually put some things into writing here, and we can educate the world a bit.
The good news is my old content is now going to stay relevant for longer. So thank you for that.
For sure. Yeah, right. All we've got to do is slap a new title on your old talk and you're back in business, man. That's great. Maybe not even a new
title.
Build
serverless functions you won't hate.
Yeah, exactly.
It's just exactly the same thing.
Yeah. AWS you won't hate has a weird ring to it, but I'm kind of into that too, All right, man. Well, look, it's been nice catching up. We are, I should say, getting into the cadence of doing this thing on a roughly monthly schedule, although as the stars align for the three of us to get on and chat, it's monthly-ish. But we'll gosh, I guess I'll catch up with you in a few weeks, and we'll see where you're at that point.
Yeah, in a few weeks I should be nearly done with planting season, thank God. So I will be coming at you live from a beach or something. I don't know. I need a break.
There we go. That sounds lovely. Well, take care of yourself, and we'll catch up soon, man.
You as well, Mike. Good to see you.